"That piece of junk won't even clear a garden patch," one of the cowhands sneered, pointing a greasy finger at the old tractor. The laughter from the others was sharp and cruel. But then, the old farmer simply turned the key, and the roar that followed silenced every single one of them. What they saw next would make them regret every word. If you believe that true worth is often hidden, smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. We want to know where you're watching from, so drop your city in the comments below. And if you're ready to see them get what they deserve, type vindication. The scene was a sprawling farm in the heart of Kansas, under a sun that baked the earth until it cracked. It was late July, and the air was thick with the smell of dry soil and diesel. 22-year-old Clara stood with her hands clenched, her face flushed with a mix of anger and humiliation. Before her stood Chet and Brody, two seasoned cowhands with muscles earned from work and egos inflated by experience. They were laughing at the machine parked by the old barn, a 1970s Iron Horse 440, faded orange and covered in a layer of dust that seemed as old as the tractor itself. It was her grandfather's. The problem was simple and catastrophic. The farm's brand new $500,000 Titan harvester had broken down. A complex hydraulic failure, the mechanic had said over the phone, and he was at least 4 hours away. Meanwhile, a dark line of clouds was gathering on the western horizon, a summer storm that promised hail the size of golf balls. They had less than half a day to clear the last, most valuable 3-hectare field of wheat. Losing that crop wasn't just a setback, it was a financial blow the farm might not recover from. Every modern piece of equipment was either broken or too small for the job. Every piece except the forgotten relic in the barn. "We're wasting time, Clara," Chet said, spitting tobacco juice near her boot. "We should just accept the loss. That thing is a joke." Clara's grandfather, Liam, a man of 75 years with skin like worn leather, walked slowly out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He didn't look at Chet or Brody. His eyes were fixed on the old Iron Horse. He had a quiet confidence that irritated the cowhands even more. They saw a crazy old man lost in nostalgia, refusing to accept that his time and the time of his machines was over. Liam simply patted the rusty fender of the tractor, a silent gesture of affection. Clara's hope was fading fast, eroded by the mockery and the ticking clock. The cowhands saw a heap of scrap metal. Her grandfather saw a promise. But what secret was hiding under that faded orange hood? Could a 50-year-old machine really compete with modern technology? Or was this just the final, desperate act of a family about to lose everything? The tension on the farm was so thick you could taste it. The air smelled of failure, the metallic tang of the broken Titan harvester, a monument to expensive, useless technology. Gert sat gleaming and silent in the middle of the field, while the old Iron Horse waited by the dilapidated wooden barn, where it had slept for years. The contrast was stark. The future had failed, and now they were turning to the past. Clara felt trapped between these two worlds. She had grown up hearing her grandfather's stories about the Iron Horse, how it had been the first powerful machine to tame their land, how its engine was a masterpiece of simple, reliable engineering. For her, it wasn't just a tractor, it was her family's legacy. Liam had been a brilliant mechanic in his younger days. He didn't just fix machines, he understood them. He'd spent an entire winter, decades ago, rebuilding the Iron Horse's engine, modifying it with parts he'd designed himself. He claimed he'd doubled its original horsepower, but no one had ever seen proof. It became a family legend, a tall tale the young cowhands dismissed as the ramblings of an old man. "Sure, Liam," Brody would say with a condescending smile, "and I bet it runs on corn whiskey too." The cultural divide on the farm was clear. For Chet and Brody, farming was a business of margins, efficiency, and data. They trusted computer-guided systems and GPS, not instinct and old iron. To them, Clara's sentimental attachment to the tractor was a liability, a foolish weakness in a world that demanded ruthless pragmatism. "Clara, be serious," Chet argued, his tone softening slightly, trying to sound like the voice of reason. "We're on a deadline. The bank doesn't care about family stories. We lose this crop, and our loan payments are in jeopardy." He was right, and that made it hurt even more. Her own father, watching from the porch of the main house, looked worried. He was caught between his respect for his father, Liam, and the cold, hard numbers that Chet was so good at calculating. A younger farmhand, Mike, stood by, not saying a word. He looked at the old tractor, then at the new harvester, his face a mask of uncertainty. He was new to the farm and didn't want to choose sides. but his eyes kept drifting back to Liam, who was now calmly checking the tractor's fluid levels. Liam's hands, though wrinkled, moved with a steady, practiced grace. He didn't rush. He didn't acknowledge the small crowd that had gathered. He was in his own world, communicating with the machine in a language only they understood. He pulled out the oil dipstick, wiped it, and checked it again, his expression unreadable. To the Cowhands, this was all a pointless ritual, a pathetic delay of the inevitable. What's he doing? Praying to it? Brody whispered to Chet, who chuckled in response. Clara heard them. Every laugh, every smirk, felt like a physical blow. She wanted to scream, to defend her grandfather, but what could she say? The tractor hadn't been started in 5 years. What if they were right? What if it was just a piece of junk? The final nail in the coffin came via a phone call. The mechanic for the Titan harvester called back. "Bad news," he said, his voice crackling. "My truck broke down. I won't make it out there before dark." The storm on the weather radar had just been upgraded to severe, with a clear trajectory toward their farm. The window of opportunity was closing, and panic began to set in. Clara's father walked down from the porch, his face grim. "Liam," he said, his voice strained. "Dad, this is enough. We have to cut our losses. The insurance might cover some of it if we just leave it." He was siding with Chet and Brody. The logic was sound, but it felt like a surrender. Clara felt completely isolated, standing by her grandfather against a wall of doubt. This was the opening Chet was waiting for. He stepped forward, a smug look on his face. "I'll make this interesting," he announced to everyone. "I'll bet a month's pay, my entire paycheck, that this thing," he gestured dismissively at the iron horse, "can't even plow a single row before it sputters and dies." The challenge hung in the air, a direct insult to Liam and his life's work. Brody grinned, nodding in agreement. "I'll second that. This will be the easiest money we ever made." Clara looked at her grandfather, expecting him to be angry, to finally lash out. But Liam's expression didn't change. He simply finished checking the tires and slowly, deliberately, began to climb into the driver's seat. He ignored the bet, which seemed to infuriate Chet even more. Liam settled into the cracked vinyl seat. It groaned under his weight. The steering wheel was worn smooth from decades of use. He looked at Clara, and for the first time he gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was all the reassurance she needed. She stood taller, her resolve hardening. "You've got a bet, Chet," she said, her voice clear and steady. The Cowhands were taken aback by her sudden confidence. Liam put the key in the ignition. He turned it. A loud metallic clunk echoed from the engine, followed by absolute silence. Chet and Brody erupted in laughter. It was a harsh, mocking sound that echoed across the yard. "Told you," Brody yelled, slapping Chet on the back. "It's a hunk of junk." Clara's heart sank into her stomach. The humiliation was overwhelming. Her father shook his head in disappointment and started to walk away, but Liam remained calm. He turned the key again. Clunk. Silence. He closed his eyes, taking a slow breath as if listening for something no one else could hear. Then his hand moved under the dashboard to a spot hidden in the shadows. He flipped a small unmarked metal switch. It made a faint clicking sound. He looked straight ahead at the field, his jaw set. He turned the key a third time. For a split second, there was only the click of the switch. Then Liam turned the key for the third time. There was no clunk. There was an explosion. A deep, guttural roar erupted from the iron horse, a sound that didn't belong on a farm. It wasn't the chugging rattle of a diesel engine. It was the thunder of pure, unrestrained power. The ground vibrated, and the windows of the old barn rattled in their frames. Everyone froze. Chet and Brody's laughter died in their throats, replaced by looks of utter shock. Clara's father, who had been walking away in defeat, stopped and slowly turned around, his eyes wide with disbelief. This was not a tractor engine. It was something else entirely, something violent and alive. Liam, sitting calmly in the driver's seat, gave the throttle a small nudge. The engine screamed a high-pitched, ferocious sound that echoed across the fields, silencing the birds and scattering a flock of chickens. "What in God's name is in that thing?" Mike, the young farmhand, whispered, his voice filled with awe. He took a step closer, mesmerized. The mockery on the faces of the Cowhands had been replaced by a mixture of confusion and fear. This wasn't part of the joke. This was something they didn't understand, and it scared them. The wind was picking up now, carrying the first heavy scent of rain. Dark clouds churned overhead. A weather alert buzzed on Chet's phone. Tornado watch issued for the county. The stakes had just been raised again. The time for talk was officially over. "It's just loud, that's all," Chet muttered, trying to regain his composure, but his voice lacked conviction. "It'll fall apart the second it hits the soil." Liam ignored him. He didn't look at anyone. His focus was absolute. With a heavy thud, he engaged the gear. The massive tractor lurched forward, its wheels digging into the dirt. It didn't chug. It charged. Clara's father ran to her side. "Clara, what did he do to that engine?" he asked, his voice a mix of amazement and concern. I don't know," she admitted, though a forgotten memory was starting to surface, a memory of her grandfather spending hours in the barn with car parts and welding tools, smiling to himself. The subplot of their family's internal doubt was beginning to shift. The question was no longer whether the old man was crazy, but what kind of genius had been hiding in plain sight all these years. All eyes were now fixed on the Iron Horse as it reached the edge of the wheat field. It didn't slow down. It was a rusty orange beast about to be unleashed. As Liam reached the field, he pulled a heavy lever. A custom-built attachment lowered from the back of the tractor, a monstrous, wide-set plow combined with a harvester head, something no one had ever seen before. It was a marvel of brutal, efficient engineering, clearly fabricated by Liam himself in his workshop. This was the tractor's first secret. The second was under the hood. The Iron Horse hit the dense wall of wheat, and for a moment everyone expected it to choke, to stall, to die. Instead, the engine roared louder. It didn't just cut through the crop, it devoured it. Thick stalks of wheat were ripped from the ground and funneled into the harvester head, while the massive plows turned the earth behind it. Soil and chaff were thrown 10 feet into the air, creating a massive cloud of dust and debris. The speed was breathtaking. It was a force of nature. Liam was wrestling with the steering wheel, his old body moving with a surprising strength and agility. He wasn't just driving, he was taming a wild animal. Chet and Brody stood motionless, their jaws hanging open. Everything they knew about farming, about physics and machinery, was being defied right before their eyes. This 50-year-old tractor was moving twice as fast as the brand-new Titan harvester ever could. It was impossible. As the tractor tore through the field, Clara finally explained. She spoke to her father, but loud enough for Mike and the others to hear. "Grandpa used to race stock cars," she said, her voice filled with a pride she hadn't felt in years. Before he inherited the farm, he had to give it up, but he never lost the passion. He called this his retirement project. The revelation landed like a thunderclap. Liam wasn't just a farmer. He was an engineer, a racer, a man who understood power on a primal level. The Iron Horse wasn't a tractor. It was his custom-built hot rod, disguised in a farmer's overalls. Clara's tears of humiliation had transformed into tears of pure joy. She was laughing, cheering her grandfather on. Her father watched speechless, as the man he thought was growing frail and detached from reality single-handedly saved their farm. He was witnessing a legend. They all were. The first hour passed in a blur of motion and noise. Liam had already cleared more than half the field. He drove with a relentless, focused fury. The pattern he carved was perfect, with no wasted movement. As the first heavy drops of rain began to fall, he finished the last row, 3 hectares, cleared in just under 2 hours. The promise from the story's title was fulfilled, not just as a fact, but as a spectacle of sheer, unbelievable power. Liam throttled down the engine, and the thunderous roar settled into a deep, rumbling idle before he finally turned the key. The sudden silence that fell over the farm was deafening. Dust settled, and the smell of rain, ozone, and hot metal filled the air. Liam just sat there for a long moment, his silhouette framed against the dark, stormy sky. He had done it. The crop was safe. He slowly climbed down from the seat, his movements stiff but steady. He looked less like a tired old man, and more like a warrior who had just won a decisive battle. The spell was broken. Chet, his face pale and slick with sweat, looked from the perfectly cleared field to the monstrous machine, then to Liam. He had lost more than a month's pay. He had lost his authority, his credibility. His entire identity was built on being the expert, the one who understood modern efficiency. In 2 hours, an old man had shattered that identity with a machine Chet had called junk. Without a word, he turned and walked toward his pickup truck, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Brody tried to save face. "Just lucky," he stammered, his voice weak. That engine's going to be a pile of molten scrap by morning. But his words were empty, and nobody paid him any attention. The era of their undisputed reign was over. Clara's father walked over to Liam. The two men stood for a moment, the father and son, with a lifetime of unspoken words between them. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry I ever doubted you." Liam simply put a hand on his son's shoulder and nodded. It was enough. The respect that had been eroded by time and misunderstanding was instantly restored. Before Chet could drive away, Clara walked over to his truck window. "I believe you owe me something," she said. Her voice wasn't gloating or angry. It was calm, firm, and full of the authority she now rightfully owned. Humiliated, Chet pulled out his checkbook and wrote the check, his hand shaking slightly. The power dynamic on the farm had been permanently redrawn. Clara was no longer the sentimental girl to be tolerated. She was a leader who had shown faith and courage. Liam was no longer the relic of a bygone era. He was a living legend, the farm's resident genius. Mike, the young farmhand, immediately went to the iron horse, looking at it with a newfound reverence. He grabbed a rag and started wiping down the dusty engine, wanting to be close to it, to understand it. The consequences of that afternoon were immediate and irreversible. It wasn't just about a cleared field, it was about the restoration of a legacy and the birth of a new leader. The storm that night was violent, but it didn't matter. The harvest was in, and the farm was safe. The next morning, the air was clean and cool. Clara's father called a meeting in the main office. He, Clara, Liam, Chet, and Mike were all present. The tension was palpable. Everyone knew this meeting wasn't just about the previous day, it was about the future. This was Clara's moment. The external challenge of the harvest was over. The new challenge was internal, how to lead. She had the respect, but now she had to use it. Instead of demanding Chet be fired, Clara showed a wisdom that surprised everyone, including her father. She looked directly at Chet. "No one knows the commodity markets or the new irrigation tech like you do, Chet," she began, her tone professional. "Your skills are valuable, but your attitude was going to cost us everything. You saw new as always better, and old as always useless. Yesterday proved that both are dangerous assumptions." She stood up and walked to the head of the table. "From now on, things are changing. We aren't a new farm or an old farm, we're a smart farm. We're creating a new maintenance protocol for all equipment, and Grandpa Liam will be our chief mechanic and technical supervisor. His word on machinery is final." It was a brilliant move. She wasn't just firing an opponent, she was changing the entire system. She integrated Chet's strengths while putting his ego firmly in check under Liam's authority. Her father leaned back in his chair, a proud smile spreading across his face. He saw his daughter was no longer just his heir. She was a leader. Her growth was visible not in her victory, but in how she handled its aftermath. Brody, who had also been called to the meeting, couldn't take it. He stood up abruptly. "I'm not working for a girl and taking orders from some old-timer," he snarled, and stormed out. No one tried to stop him. Chet, however, was a different story. He had been humbled, but he was also a pragmatist. He recognized power and results when he saw them. He looked at Clara, then at Liam, and gave a slow, grudging nod. "All right," he said. "I'll do it." A new, tense but functional dynamic was born. The arc of Clara's journey from being mocked to being the boss was complete. Later that day, she found Liam in the barn, gently polishing the iron horse's faded hood. He opened a locked cabinet and pulled out a set of old, hand-drawn blueprints. They were detailed schematics for the engine. "There's a supercharger in there," Liam said with a twinkle in his eye. "Salvaged it from an old dragster. It's what that hidden switch engages." He rolled up the blueprints and handed them to Clara. "It's yours now, the tractor and the future. You know what to do with them." The weeks that followed transformed the farm. The hierarchy was clear. Clara's decisions were respected, and Liam's oversight of the machinery was unquestionable. Chet surprisingly adapted. The humiliation he'd suffered gave way to a technical curiosity. He started watching Liam, asking questions about the iron horse's mechanics, fascinated by the raw engineering that had outperformed cutting-edge tech. A tense, unlikely alliance began to form, built on a new mutual respect. The story of the tractor that saved the harvest spread through the county like wildfire, becoming a local legend. That's when the opportunity for a final showdown presented itself. The organizer of the annual county fair, an event that drew farmers from all over the state, paid them a visit. He'd heard the rumors and wanted the Iron Horse to compete in a special plowing competition, a race against the clock on a difficult, muddy track. It was a chance to cement the legend or be exposed as a fluke. Liam was hesitant, preferring the peace of his workshop, but Clara saw it for what it was, a chance to prove that what happened wasn't luck, but the result of genius and hard work. News of their entry spread fast, and it reached Brody. After leaving the farm in disgrace, he'd landed a job with a massive corporate agricultural firm, AgriCorp, a company known for swallowing up family farms. Driven by a desire for revenge, Brody convinced his new bosses to enter the same competition. They would have him drive their newest, most powerful tractor, the Titan 9000, the successor to the model that had failed on Clara's farm. AgriCorp saw it as a perfect marketing opportunity, crush the local legend and reassert the dominance of modern technology. The stage was set for a public showdown. This was no longer about a field of wheat. It was about two ways of life, two philosophies, clashing in an arena of mud and diesel. It was tradition versus progress, the lone genius versus the corporate machine. The day of the county fair arrived. The air was electric, smelling of popcorn, hay, and diesel fuel. Thousands of people gathered around the competition track. A stretch of rain-beaten earth turned into a swamp of thick, sticky mud, a true test of power and traction. AgriCorp's Titan 9000 gleamed under the sun, a mountain of green and yellow metal that looked more like a spaceship than a tractor. Brody sat in the driver's seat with an arrogant smirk, waving to the crowd. He went first. The Titan's engine hummed with quiet, computerized efficiency. He attacked the track, and his performance was impressive. The massive tires churned through the mud, the tractor's smart traction technology driving it forward. He finished the course with a formidable time of 3 minutes and 27 seconds. The crowd cheered. Brody raised his arms in triumph, looking directly at Clara with a stare that said, "Top that." Then it was the Iron Horse's turn. It looked like an ancient toy next to the track torn up by the Titan. The crowd murmured. Some of them laughed. Liam walked with Clara to the tractor. "I built it, but you understand it," he said, his voice steady. "It's your turn to drive." This was the final test, the passing of the torch. Clara felt a surge of fear, but she pushed it down. She climbed into the cracked vinyl seat, her hands finding the worn steering wheel. She knew every sound, every vibration of this machine. She took a deep breath, looked at the muddy track, and met Brody's gaze. And then, she turned the key and flipped the hidden switch. The roar of the Iron Horse ripped through the air, a raw, organic sound that shocked the crowd into silence. This wasn't the hum of a computer. It was the heartbeat of a beast. Clara didn't wait. She slammed the tractor into gear and launched it forward. The Iron Horse hit the mud like a bullet. Where the heavy Titan had struggled, the lighter, more agile Iron Horse seemed to glide. Its narrower tires cut through the mud instead of trying to roll over it. Liam's genius wasn't just raw power but balance. Clara wrestled with the wheel, her entire body engaged, feeling the terrain, anticipating every slip. It wasn't a computer driving, it was her instinct. She kept the engine in its power band, the supercharger screaming as she tore through the track in a chaotic, glorious display of skill and might. She blasted across the finish line, covered in mud, engine roaring in triumph. The timer flashed, 2 minutes and 51 seconds. She hadn't just won, she had annihilated his time. For a moment, there was a stunned silence, and then the crowd exploded into a deafening cheer. Brody stood motionless, his mouth agape, publicly and utterly defeated by the very girl and the very piece of junk he had scorned. The Iron Horse's victory was more than just a competition win, it was a coronation. The fair organizers rushed over, handing Clara a trophy and a sizable prize check. Reporters from agricultural journals surrounded her, firing off questions about the miracle tractor. The AgriCorp executives who had shown up for an easy publicity win quietly loaded up their machine and left, humiliated. On the stage, accepting the trophy, Clara took the microphone. "This victory isn't mine," she said, her voice booming over the speakers. "It belongs to 70 years of hard work, of sleepless nights in a workshop, and a belief that real value doesn't rust. It belongs to my grandfather, Liam." She held the trophy up in his direction. The crowd roared even louder for Liam, who simply gave a proud nod, pride shining in his eyes. Everyone's arc was complete. Clara was no longer just the farm's heir. She was a respected leader in her community, a champion who had defended her family's honor. Chet came up to her, not with a fake smile but with a nod of genuine respect. "You handled her well," he said, referring to the tractor as if it were a prize racehorse. Their rivalry had finally settled into a functional professional partnership. Brody, on the other hand, vanished into the crowd. His arrogance had led him to a moment of hubris and then to an unforgettable public fall. His story became a cautionary tale. Clara's revenge was not cruel, it was righteous. She hadn't sought to destroy but to prove worth. And in doing so, she not only saved her farm, but inspired an entire community. The family was now financially secure, but more importantly, their legacy was stronger than ever, forged not in new steel, but in the unbreakable heart of an old tractor and the courage of the young woman who believed in it. 2 years later, the farm was thriving like never before. Clara's smart farming philosophy, blending the wisdom of experience with the precision of modern tech, had proven to be a resounding success. They had expanded, acquiring a neighboring plot of land and becoming a model for sustainable and efficient operation. Clara ran the business with a steady hand, while Chet, now her loyal operations manager, streamlined logistics with an enthusiasm she never thought possible. The Iron Horse was now semi-retired. It wasn't used for the daily grind anymore, but was kept in pristine condition in the old workshop, a living legend and a beloved member of the family. Liam, his health now more frail but his spirit as sharp as ever, spent his days teaching Mike, who had become the farm's foreman, the secrets of the engine. It was a transfer of knowledge, ensuring the machine's soul would never die. One warm autumn afternoon, Clara stepped out of the office for a breath of fresh air. She walked to the workshop. Inside, she saw Liam showing her 5-year-old son, Leo, the gears and pistons of the Iron Horse's engine. The boy stared with wide-eyed wonder, just as she had as a child. "Grandpa," the boy said, "someday am I going to drive as fast as Mommy?" Liam chuckled, a soft, happy sound. "If you listen to the machine," he replied, "it'll tell you how fast to go." Clara smiled. The cycle was continuing. The tractor that stood for their past had secured their future and was now planting the seed of legend in the next generation. And that's how a forgotten piece of junk and the wisdom of an old farmer taught everyone a lesson about where true power comes from. It doesn't come from computers or shiny steel, but from the heart, the skill, and the courage to believe when no one else will. What did you think of Clara's revenge? Was it satisfying? Let us know in the comments below. We love reading your thoughts. If you watched until the end, comment, "I watched to the end," so we know who our real fans are. Your support is what allows us to keep bringing you more stories like this one. And don't go anywhere. There's another incredible story of justice and vindication waiting for you on the screen right now. Click on it, and we'll see you there.